Liberation Day, or as we may come to know it, the day when the rest of the world is liberated from U.S. hegemony. We just had a pretty historic day. Monday, we're recording this on Tuesday. Gonna try and get it out quickly, hopefully. But Trump has imposed blanket tariffs across the board on basically every country, apparently aside from Russia. This is pretty historic day. If these tariffs hold, who knows what the game plan actually is going to be. But this is what could turn out to be one of the largest tax hikes in American history. And I got to hand it to Trump. Inheriting a bull market and speed running us straight into a recession is pretty impressive, no matter how you take it. This is the shortest time it's ever taken a president to inherit a bull market to turn it into a negative stock market. So it's pretty unprecedented, no matter how you slice it. And I saw this quote I thought was pretty funny. I think this was back in Obama's presidency. He said that any president that loses 1,000 points on the Dow Jones Industrial Average should immediately be impeached. So I'm open to take Trump at his word for it now. But what what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, not a great day for the stocks. I mean, I'm a stock guy, so not a good couple days. And it is, I mean, we are at the point where this will be a historic stock market crash. Now, I think the Dow Jones is down like I want to say it was around 15% over the course of 3 days, which is, that's equivalent to like the Black Tuesday of 1987 or all of these crashes that are historic. Similar to COVID, I think COVID might have been 30%. Um, so we're in that range, and it doesn't look like there's going to be any quick recovery anytime soon. Like when COVID hit, it was a V shape, so it crashed quick, but then it bounced back up as the Fed was printing money. The scenario we're in now, it's going to be the opposite. There is no, at least as far as I can tell, there's no plan on resorting back to quantitative easing to adjust the stock market and get it back up. I think it's part of Trump's plan a little bit of tanking the stock market. Now, the one thing I will say is I do respect the move because and I've gone on a deep dive trying to understand all of this. And over the course of the last couple of months, tariffs have been in the news. So I've been looking into a lot of the economics and the mechanisms involved. And then specifically over this last weekend, when he came out with the blanket tariff, started diving a lot more deep into it and coming across exactly what his plan is. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, or theories, or a lot of speculation on what his plan is. Some people are saying he's purposely trying to take the stock market so that he can put his money in and get it while it's low and get personal profit off of it. There's other people saying he is trying to help the working man and bump up the trade deficit. And there's other people saying that he's trying to punish the globalists for them, what he sees as them, going against him during his campaign and over the past 10 years. Now, to try to find out what he's actually trying to do or what the plan really is, didn't cross my mind until the last couple of days. But good way to start would be to simply look at the paper that was published by his chief economic advisor, detailing out. It's called "The User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System," and it details out a multi-step plan. And the first step is massive tariffs on all of our importing trade partners. And so after getting into that, I feel like I have a better idea of what his goal is. I do think it's risky, and it may not work out the way that he is presenting it, but I do think that he is doing it for a good reason. And you know, not so often that a politician, willingly does something that's this detrimental to his reputation while in office, knowing that it's the right thing and knowing that 99% of people don't understand why it's the right thing.
Yeah, so the one of the things I've been seeing a lot in my algorithm, my side of the aisle, has been saying we're experiencing short-term pain for long-term pain. It's, so I just some like funny like that. Because obviously in the short term, everyone sees how this is gonna hurt. Not only like average Americans, it's gonna raise prices for us. It's also gonna hurt big companies. It's gonna hurt the elite as well. We're already seeing like 20% sell-offs in the stock market. Tariffs are essentially uh, like a tax hike on corporations. It makes it more expensive for them to do business, right? So that's going to be hurting their wallets as well. One of the things I I'm kind of thinking this is what he's trying to do. It's kind of feels like he's manufacturing a recession to try and turn it by magic or brute force back into the 1950s again, essentially, right? As and we'll start getting into a little bit more like what their theory behind it might be, but I just think this is going to be a pretty hard struggle, I think, for a while here for us, and whether this pays off or not, it's risky. We talked about talked about it last night, but let's start getting into it a little bit on what they think is going to come out of this.
So okay, so yeah, it is very risky, and I think that they know that and they understand the risk. So basically, what's happening is it's something called the Triffin Dilemma, and it exists. And an economist, Robert Triffin, pointed this out in the 1960s. I think it was 1960, where he pointed this out because we had just came up with Bretton Woods, and in Bretton Woods, which was in 1944, that was, and we discussed a little bit on the St. Patrick's Day episode. But what happened there was we established the global economy where the U.S. dollar is pegged to gold, and all of the other currencies are pegged to the U.S. dollar. That makes the U.S. dollar the world reserve currency. During Bretton Woods, there was debate between us and Britain on whether or not that was a good idea, and they actually preferred we go with something called the Bancor, which would be a separate currency that is strictly just the reserve currency. It's not a national currency. It's the global currency. And all of the other national currencies are pegged to that. That was an idea that was tossed around. And, the United States was the powerhouse at the time. So they had the leverage at the negotiating table, and they wanted the benefits of having the reserve currency be our national currency. And so that's what we ended up doing. But what Robert Triffin pointed out was that when a national currency is simultaneously serving as the world reserve currency, there is a dilemma in the long run where eventually there will reach a point where it can't fulfill the needs of both. So as a national currency, we our nation's interest is to be competitive on the global stage when it comes to trade, right? Our exports versus imports, fixing the trade balance. That part I think everyone is getting, and that ties directly to the tariffs. We trade at a deficit, and we want to shrink that deficit, and so that's what the tariffs are. But
Can I
what
hop
people,
in right there and ask
yeah, yeah.
a question on that? Don't we trade at a deficit on purpose though? Like, isn't that part
Mhm.
of being the global reserve currency is we kind of have to trade at a deficit because other people are using our currency?
Exactly. Yes. And that was the part where I kind of had it backwards at first. Was I thought that the reason we keep taking on all of this debt is because we aren't able to have a trade surplus. But really it's the opposite. The reason we aren't able to have a trade surplus is because we continue to take on all this debt. But the reason we do that is because we want to provide, that's the role of the reserve currency, is to provide liquidity for the rest of the world. So we need to do that. If we stop taking on the debt, then the global economy would shut down. The more debt we take on, the more our trade deficit is going to grow. Eventually, we're at the point where basically the United States is obligated at this point, if they want to keep this system running, to continue to max out our credit card at the store, not actually make any money to pay the credit card bill, but instead just go get another credit card, use that credit card to pay off this credit card, and then continue doing that to the interest payments keep rising and rising and rising. Eventually, this doesn't make sense anymore. Like, eventually, there's a point where no one's going to give the loan. Like, there's no way to pay back the loan. It's just a big Ponzi scheme. Everyone knows that, and so there, the system is broken. The machine that is our global economy is broken, and it needs to be fixed. And it comes down to the fact that the dollar is overvalued because all of the other national currencies are valued based on their exchange rates with the other currencies, but the dollar can't get down to its actual value because it's artificially overvalued based on the fact that it's the reserve currency, and
And
that brings additional value to it.
and I think part of what this economic restructuring they're trying to do is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in the next couple months here, we're going to have to like refinance our interest rate payments, right? And we have like a huge chunk, something like $2 trillion that we're paying something like 3.4% on, something like that. And essentially, like, we can't afford to make these interest payments. So essentially, what part of the plan is to try and get those interest payments down like the next time through.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, I mean, it also, now that I'm thinking about it too, Trump has been Trump has been just truthing out at Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, just demanding that he lower the interest rates. Now, he did that in his last presidency too. That president shouldn't be doing that because they're not supposed to have that kind of relationship where the president can tell the chairman of the Fed what to do and pressure him into doing it. But anyway, he keeps telling him to lower the interest rates. And now that you mentioned that, that might be why, is because we know that we're going to have to roll over this debt again coming up soon, whereas we would want to do it at a low interest rate rather than a high one. That could be that seems like that could be a layer of the plan as well.
Yeah. But getting back to what we were saying, so part number one of this moving picture is that, you know, us being the global reserve currency is almost a hindrance to us, right?
Right. Yeah. There's benefits, but there's trade offs. There's also like if it's not that we are just so bad at producing and so a bunch of lazy Americans who don't want to work, and that's why we keep trading at a deficit. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we're the reserve currency, and because our currency is overvalued, it just costs more to produce here than it would anywhere else. And there's no way to fix that without getting the rest of the world to cooperate and all, we it's basically a game theory now. Everyone has to hit the button of like, yes, we will cooperate to fix this whole system. And if one person decides to hit the button, no, I want to take it all for myself, then everyone else gets kind of screwed. So I think that's what Trump's doing with these tariffs, is he's saying, I'm hitting the button, and if you want to be, if you want to stay in the system that we have, like, you better come over here and convince me not to hit the button, basically.
Yeah. So another part of this is that he wants to bring manufacturing back to the US, right? But
Mhm.
what you just said, and something I'd read a little bit earlier, was it might be damn near impossible for us to become like a manufacturing superpower just because it's so expensive to produce here. Our labor costs are like one of the highest in the entire world, right? So for us to be like manufacturing producers, we have to be producing like luxury goods, essentially. We have to be producing like high value goods. And we might be like too far gone at this point. We've already like offshored like so much of it that I don't really see companies saying like, oh wow, like we're getting hit with a 30% tariff. Like we gotta go build a $20 billion factory in the United States, right? Like are they not just gonna wait out this regime essentially and it's kind of like continue doing what they're doing?
Yeah, I can see that too, especially when it comes to like things like devices and clothing and stuff like that. Gosh, shit, did I lose you?
I'm still here.
Oh shit! All right, you're back. All right, hand. I'll restart from that one.
Yeah.
I'll cut that part out. All right, but yeah, no, I can see that being true, but especially when it comes to like devices and clothing and stuff like that. In Vietnam, people working in the factories are making 20 cents an hour or something like that. Like we're our minimum wage is what, $8, and most people are saying that's not enough. We're getting paid 100 times more than these net exporting countries, and yes, it's just going to be way more expensive to produce stuff like that here. I think the only area where that's the most important is, of course, the weapons and military vehicles and things like that. And they, in this paper that Trump's economic advisor wrote up here, he even mentions that military security is linked to the reserve currency, or it's linked to the Triffin Dilemma through the currency, which is that the reason that we need when he's talking about building up exports, at first I'm thinking like, okay, what are we going to start building? Cars and stuff like that here, which maybe we do a little bit. I know he's targeting the cars, but I think primarily what we're looking for is like is steel and like refineries and all of these minerals that we can use to build, planes and new technology, chips, everything that's useful for the military, so that we can continue to fulfill our role as the world's policeman. Because basically, right now we are obligated to continue to build up this military and provide protection to all of Western Europe, and but you know we're not able to do it because of this reserve currency problem. And so basically, I think the deal would then be, hey, if Europe wants us to continue providing it with weapons and protection, then are going to need to cooperate with us and allow us to weaken our currency so that we can continue to manufacture it and export it at reasonable prices. Otherwise, we're just going to be, the whole thing's going to go down.
Right. Speaking back on manufacturing, have you seen like have you heard of BYD?
China.
Yeah, it's China's like number one car company is
Mhm.
BYD, right? Uh they had they've recently built new like manufacturing facilities. It's the size of a city, I think. It is like a sprawling landscape of like, and I think another part of this I've seen China has nearly like fully autonomous factories, right? How do you
Mhm.
compete with a labor input of zero, or like whatever upkeep you need to keep these machines running or whatever?
So that is a good point, and I didn't see the BYD one, but I have seen a lot about that company. I know they're one of Tesla's biggest competitors in China. Like they're blowing Tesla out of the water in China. But
Well, dude,
speaking of autonomous factories, sorry, last thing
yeah,
here
yeah.
on autonomous factories, we have autonomous factories as well, and we did have them first, and we actually put one of the first autonomous factories in China, and the man who did that was Elon Musk. But we do have, I don't know if they're fully autonomous, but the cars are it's based, they're 3D printing the cars basically.
Uh-huh.
They're the gigafactories. They got one in Austin. They got a couple,
Yeah,
a couple of them now.
I do remember seeing that now, like even like 5 years back or something about like the 3D printing cars. But apparently this BYD company is like so so big and so good that like you can buy them in the US. We have something like 100% or more tariffs on their cars because they would just completely destroy our like car industry essentially. Like the retail price on like their starter EV is something like 8 grand or something.
Yeah, that's insane.
Like that's
Um,
crazy. And then they have like super
are they
lux.
autonomous too? Do they drive? Are they like
I
self-driving
think
too? I
so,
think
yeah.
if they're not there yet, they're at least working on it. I know that.
They have like luxury ones that would rival, like BMWs, Mercedes, things like that that go for like 2025, I think. And, like without like our like insane tariffs that we put on them.
Yeah, I mean, China is probably the main reason for all of these tariffs, just because they're the ones that don't play by the rules when it comes to like global exchange, whereas like everyone else kind of understands this. China currently, at least from the perspective of Trump and America at this point, China is the person in the prisoner's dilemma that continues to try to take the the winnings for themselves rather than share it with the rest of the world, where they'll copy. Was it you that sent me the video about how they made it legal
I was
to copy
yeah,
intellectual property?
I was about to bring that up. So, and then you said China's been caught numerous times. They have their own laws saying that they can't like copy like American intellectual property essentially, right? The only reason they do it is because that's like what the standard is across the entire globe. There's like global trade agreements that like you get your intellectual property rights so people can't just come in and like make the same exact thing and undercut you, right? But I saw last night, I sent this to you. I haven't been able to verify it, so I don't know if it's real, but they might have just passed something essentially saying that's off the table now. Like we're just going to make iPhones and we're going to sell them at pennies on the dollar. And if that's true, we might truly be fucked.
Yeah, realistically, they've always done that, but like you said, they accept the rule, but they don't respect it. So it's
Hmm.
like if that's the global rule, that's the norm. They want a seat at the table, so it's like, yeah, but they've been caught tons of times. I mean, they even kind of self-admitted like that. They're you got American companies with all the intellectual property. They go and manufacture in China because of the cheap labor. Meanwhile, China now can just make their own, because they're just learning they're seeing how you made it, and a patent in America, doesn't
And
necessarily
like
hold up in
and
China.
like
So
dude, like 20 years ago, the thing used to be like, oh, made in China, it's cheap, it's crappy, right? It doesn't hold up to like good American made products, right? That's completely gone now. Like they are fully capable of making equivalent or greater quality products at fractions of the cost, essentially. And here's a little philosophical question behind it. It's like, what makes an iPhone? Right? Is it just that little Apple thing on there? Like, is it literally the fact that Apple slaps their logo on it, marks it up 80%, or is it the
the blue
hardware in there?
text,
Blue,
it's the
blue,
blue
is
text.
it blue text? Exactly. Or is it like the hardware in there, the software? If it's the hardware and software, then China's going to be able to recreate that immediately. They already make all the iPhones, I'm pretty sure. Like they're already produced in China. If they don't have to slap that little Apple on there, they can sell it for probably half the cost.
So with the Apple example, I agree with what you're saying for the most part. With the Apple example, I say the blue text is a joke, but that actually is kind of partially what gives Apple some of its value is that it has that network effect where like, you know, my iPhone is more valuable to me if everyone else I know has an iPhone too, because then I can see when their texts are read and we can like and do all the things that you could do with other iPhones.
I was an
Whereas
Android
it's like an
I was gonna say I
you're
was an
saying?
Android man my entire life, and then sometime in like early on in college, I think I switched to iPhone, and they're like, everyone's like, "Holy shit, you have an iPhone now, dude? Let's go!" It's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's the same
They
thing,
really
but then you can't switch back to Android after having an iPhone. Like it's
exactly.
crazy.
So they lock you in, and then another one. That one's kind of like if it's not the end of the world if my texts turn green, but what is a big one there is the App Store. The App Store was the technology that made Apple blow up because that is a protocol that developers are building on top of, and they can only, and it's proprietary to Apple. So if I've got if I'm building an app to sell on the App Store, and then all of a sudden China comes in with their model of a phone, well, it's like you're not going to be able to get the developers to build apps on there because they're already building on the iPhone and they've already gotten used to this protocol. But at the same time, going back to your point, which is yes, if for the most part, if China, say China does come up with their phone and they're just going to say it's the same as Apple, they might not have those network effects, but what they do have is a population that is 6 times the size of ours, and so it doesn't really matter that much if they get everyone in America to buy the Chinese phone because they could get everyone in China to buy the Chinese phone, and they already do, and that's now they've got 6 times as much data coming in, and so they can improve at a faster rate. More data input means faster advancement. So I think that's one of the reasons they caught up with us so quick, and that they're just gonna totally outrun us in the future. I don't care what anyone says. China is not. You've got people like Peter Zion or Zion or whatever his name is. He goes on Joe Rogan and says how China's collapsing because of the population problem and the one child policy and all this stuff. And it's like I don't care what that guy is saying because it's not true. China is on the path to becoming way more technologically and economically powerful than we are for sure.
And we had discussed this. This could be a death blow to United States being the economic superpower. We probably aren't even the economic superpower anymore. That's probably China. We might be like 1A, 1B right now, but this could totally just drive everyone into the arms of China potentially. Like why would people want to do business with us right now?
I mean, we still are at the top, but China's moving, they're advancing so much quicker than us, where I do agree that yes, that is one of the big risks is that we simply push them into the arms of China. And that's already happening in the Eastern Bloc. Whereas, like, there's, what I think probably the most likely outcome of this is that we turn into a double, there's like what do they call it? like a two dual economies. There's going to be the Eastern economy and the Western economy. There's no longer going to be a world reserve currency. There's going to be a Western reserve currency and an Eastern reserve currency. And we're basically going to, at that point, we're in another Cold War. So,
Yeah. So we talked about the Triffin Dilemma and dollar overvaluation. What's like the next part of this?
yeah. So as far as this plan goes, so
Yeah.
the tariffs are the first step. And the reason for doing that is to add artificial cost to other countries trying to import here and to boost our own manufacturing to try to decrease the debt. Now, this is going to hurt these other countries, so it's also kind of a negotiation tactic. At the end of the day, the goal is to bring them to the table for what I'm going to call it right here that within the next I don't know how long it'll take, but within the next few months, there will be calls, whether it's with the entire globe or G7 or G20, there will be calls for a Mar-a-Lago Accord, and it's going to be a modern day Trump version of the 1985 Plaza Accords, which Reagan did, which was how he handled a similar situation of dollar overvaluation. Trump's going to call it in, and he's going to restructure. His goal is to restructure the entire global economy. As much as he stresses, it's about domestic manufacturing and jobs, jobs, jobs. That's campaign stuff. That's trying to get that's selling the idea to the Americans. But what it's really about is handling the Triffin Dilemma problem, and the way to do that is to restructure the rules of the global game. And so I think that is his end goal here with this whole thing.
Yeah, so I'm just looking on my I had ChatGPT summarize that article, and it says the Mar-a-Lago Accord to be a Plaza Accord style deal where allies strengthen their currencies by selling dollar reserves. So selling our countries hold our dollar in reserve, right? And that's part of the reason why our dollar is overvalued, essentially, because everyone has to hold it because it is the global reserve currency. And then it says in exchange for tariff relief. So is the thought process behind that like they sell off their dollars and essentially like like kind of just like burn them up so there's like less supply of it? Is that the thought process behind it or?
Yeah, so what we want is we want the other currencies to appreciate in value relative to the dollar. So like say right now, if a dollar is worth, I think what, about 15 pesos, we actually want our dollar to be worth less pesos. Um, so in order to do that, they want to sell. It's the opposite. They want to sell off our dollars to put more of them into supply so that they're worth less.
Okay.
And the reason that's not working here, sorry,
No, no,
this will
again.
clear it up a little bit too. The reason that's not working is because what's happening is when we, this is a better way to say it actually. This is the way to say it. So when we're trading at these deficits, we're not making any money. So we need to pay that money somehow. So we do it by taking out loans from other countries and in a sense selling them treasury bonds, which are denominated in dollars. So they can now they have that's what the reserves are. They have the US dollars in the form of treasury bonds. What we want them to do is to inject that into the economy so that the the values of the currencies relative to each other even out. But they're not doing that because they have no incentive to do that. So instead, they're just holding them in reserves and collecting interest on them and not actually injecting them into the economy. So there's less dollars in the economy, so it artificially boosts the value of the dollar. Is that
Uh-huh.
and we want them to stop doing that, but there's no actual mechanism to incentivize them to stop doing that, which is why Trump is just basically strongmanning it and saying like, okay, either either stop doing that or we're just going to jack up the tariffs.
Kind of want to circle back. We talked about this at the beginning, but why is the dollar being quote unquote so strong actually a bad thing? Because you always hear like, oh, we have to strengthen the US dollar, right? Like why is that an issue?
That's a good question. So I was wondering the same thing. And so what it is that if the dollar is more valuable, so we get paid in America, we get paid in dollars. I go to work, I get paid in dollars. Because the dollar is overvalued relative to the other currencies, that means it costs more to pay me. It would cost more for me to do a job here than it would for someone in, say, Canada to do the same job there. Even if, say, our minimum wages were the same and everything was the same, all conditions were the same, it would cost more here because we're getting paid in the currency that's overvalued. So
Okay.
we don't want it to be so strong because it
Right.
that's what makes it difficult for us to export. We want it to, we actually, it sounds like the opposite of what we want, but realistically, in the situation we're in now, we want it to depreciate in value because we want the dollar to be worth less so that it's more affordable to hire Americans to produce things rather than having to go to other countries who use a less valuable currency.
Okay. That makes sense. Um, are there any other aspects of like the plan that we have to get into before we start talking about like why it's so risky and talking about like whether we think it's actually going to work or not?
Um, I think so. I'll give just a quick overall summary of the
Hmm.
plan. The plan is we do tariffs, right? Throw out all these tariffs. Now, these are negotiation tactics. Even though he's actually implementing them, they're negotiation tactics because, as you know, all the chaos that's going on right now, stocks falling. This is happening all over the world too. So
Right.
he's
Right.
basically he's a this is a terrorist attack economically, where he is saying like I'm willing. This is a suicide bombing. Is I'm willing to destroy my own country just to burn the rest of this down if you guys don't come to the table. So now that's the incentive to come to the table. He's also threatened to withhold security guarantees, which is a huge one because literally that's the whole, the security guarantees are tied into us being the reserve currency. That's the whole point, is
Right.
that we're the ones that are the peacekeepers of the world, supposedly, which is why we continue to bomb Middle Eastern countries for no reason, but, keeping the peace. But you, regardless, if these countries want security guarantees, which a lot of them do, they're heavily incentivized to come to the table. And then the final plan is to have the Mar-a-Lago Accords, which is we're going to get everyone to cooperate and appreciate their currencies so that we can get rid of this burden, even out our trade deficit, and then get back to moving. And whether or not that's going to work, I think it's not very likely to work.
Right. So the risk here is that other countries aren't willing to play ball, right? They look at this and they say, this is a economic terrorist attack. Like we don't negotiate with terrorists, Mr. Orange Man, right? We can find trade partners elsewhere. The risk is pretty like inherent in the action, right? It's we are literally about to make doing business more expensive for everyone, right? This is across the board. It's going to be harder to trade. Trade is what makes nations wealthy, right? You want free and fair trade. That's how, people speak about like globalism like it's a bad thing, but over the last few hundred years, the reason why we've gone from, living in tiny, small cities into like blossoming urban areas is because of trade development, right? So the fact that he's kind of willing to, like burn it all down, essentially, like that's the risk. The risk is that people won't come to the table, won't agree to restructure trade deals, and essentially will say, like, all right, F you, like, have fun in this muck that you created, right?
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. Globalism is, I think everyone should be able to see that globalism is a great thing overall, and it is not like you said, people look at it like the globalists are like, people who want to have a global government and surveillance state, and it's not that that's even what they want. It's just that that is going to become inevitable for the reasons that we even said. Like I have a patent on, a technology here in America, but also I have a multinational company and I manufacture in China, but the patent doesn't work in China because there's no global government that's going to, so there's trade-offs, but yes, we are risking maybe not the end of globalization, but a big
Step back.
barricade
Yeah.
basically. Yeah, a big step back from the global expansion that we've been seeing for the last many decades. Whereas that's gonna now if that happens, that's going to be a disaster. That's Great Depression level disaster because we now see the everything shrinks. And so everyone's life savings, the value of their properties, most people don't have a bunch of cash sitting around in their bank. See, this policy actually does help anyone who's got cash sitting around because it's going to deflate the value of all of the stocks and the properties and things like that. But if that happens, all the people who have their wealth stored in stocks, properties, all these type
Which
of
is
things,
basically at anyone who's been saving for retirement.
that's gone.
Right.
That's cut in half basically. And so that is a huge risk. And once that happens, I mean, businesses are closing, people are losing jobs. Now those people have less money to spend at the other businesses who lose money and then have to close their doors and fire their people who now don't have money to spend at the other businesses. And it's a cycle that ripples throughout the whole economy, and it puts us in a spot where we everyone is just hoarding their cash basically, and no one wants to spend money, and businesses go down, unemployment soars, and the economy stagnates. And so that is a disaster, and that would happen if globalization were to be cut off and we were to keep pursuing these isolationist policies, which I can't imagine is his end goal, but I do kind of see a possibility where he thinks we're stronger than we are. Basically, we're sitting at the poker table and Trump is thinking that we have the best hand at the table, so he's going all in. And now all we're in a position right now where we just win all in and we've got our hand, but we don't know the hands necessarily of all the other players sitting at the table, and we're waiting to see whether they fold or they call. So depending on what they do, this could either be a huge payoff or it could be the end. you know.
Yeah, I mean, it is the payoff worth this risk though? Like,
Well, it has to be because so by payoff, this is the payoff. The payoff is that we just continue to keep operating as we are. The problem is that if we don't do something like this, then eventually this collapse comes naturally because of that Triffin dilemma. But I mean, that would have been we would hopefully have another couple decades before we got to that point, and and eventually all roads lead to collapse. So this is basically the payoff is that we buy ourselves another 80 years of reserve currency status where we can continue borrowing at low rates and pumping up our economy. And if it doesn't pay off, then we're going to collapse. But if we didn't do anything to begin with, then the collapse was going to come.
uh, what do you think the odds are that this works?
Well, that's a good question. What's your? Let me think about that one. What do you think?
I'd say we're gonna some countries are definitely gonna come to the table and play ball, right? Our closer allies are gonna come. Like probably like the EU, Canada and Mexico, like our closest allies. They're gonna want to continue to do business with us. Like
I know
maybe,
one who's definitely not, and that's the big one that we need to worry about, which is China.
yeah. I mean, basically at this point, it's what it seems like is this has set the table for the big battle. This is now like Trump has kind of like as you said, he's gone all in. He's played his cards. He said like put his nuts on the table and said, "All right, either China's about to completely overtake us or like we're going to like restructure our deals. We're going to be able to like hold out for another couple decades."
And even so, I mean that speaking of that, even so, like even if you were to pull another one of these Plaza Accords and have this Mar-a-Lago Accord and get all the countries to appreciate their currency, it still doesn't solve the problem.
It's right.
It delays the problem.
It's still not
Like we've
like
already did this. We did this in the 80s, and that bought us another couple decades. And now here we are again. Whereas like it doesn't. The problem is that we have a national currency that is also serving as reserve currency, and that they should have just went with the Bancor that they were that Britain was proposing back in Bretton Woods because they wanted to avoid this type of problem. But I'm curious as to whether that type of restructuring happens, where it's not just appreciating currencies, but we're not going to be the reserve currency. Maybe we go back to the gold standard. We peg something to Bitcoin.
I was gonna
Who
say
knows what
I was
this
gonna
guy's
say
going to
is
do?
this gonna open the door essentially for maybe like a global cryptocurrency?
The crypto people are hoping so. I know that it's a talk when it comes to the like the crypto podcast and you know online discourse. It is a possibility. There's someone wrote a book. I haven't read it. I want to though. It's been on my list. It's called the Bitcoin Standard, and it just makes the case for why we should go back to a similar situation as the gold standard, but peg it to something like Bitcoin. Which I mean, I could see that being an option, and that'd be pretty cool if we did.
Another thing I could see happening is like people are hearing things like this, like probably not our podcast, but like other podcasts, like oh, like this is a opportunity crypto, like one of these cryptos, might about to hit the jackpot, right? It could be none of these cryptos. It could be nothing that you see in the top 500. It could be something that's being developed right now, right?
Could be Trump coin.
It could be Trump coin, right?
Yeah,
The,
they
the,
could make
the
one
rug
up
pull.
right now and make it. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that is true. That's the thing is like, I mean, uncertainty is always bad for markets, and I think a lot of it, like you can look into all of the revenues and income and profit margins and all this stuff, and try to make sense out of why the stock market is tanking at the percentage that it is, and it's because the expected profits to go down this much. Really what it is uncertainty. When there's uncertainty, which Trump is just like a walking mascot for uncertainty, then the stock market tends to struggle because the investors want to go to something like gold or property that's going to be there still if the entire system goes to shit. And when there's a decent chance, like I think that there is, I think this is one of the biggest. This is the biggest thing that we have seen. I mean, it's up there. It's top five things, historical events that we've seen in our lifetimes.
It's
Um,
probably the biggest thing that's happened since COVID.
yeah, I would say it's bigger than COVID in the long run. Like the repercussions of this are going to last longer than COVID. COVID, they printed a bunch of money. They inflated the currency. They put a lot of companies out of business because we had to stay inside. They probably ruined the mental health of an entire generation of kids who didn't get to see their friends for 2 years. This one might have more impacts than that, depending on how it goes. If everyone comes to the table and there's a deal and it goes smoothly, fine. But if not, I mean, this could be the moment that the next this is the start of the next world war,
The straw that broke the
potentially.
camel's back.
Yeah, yeah. And the funny thing about that is, and I gotta throw just a stab at the left out there, is that they had these nationwide protests, all weekend. We're seeing these, people out in the streets with their signs, and I'm looking at all the signs, and I think I saw about 25 of them calling Trump a fascist or Elon a fascist. A bunch of people complaining about the Doge, a couple people complaining about trans rights and abortion, which I don't think Trump's even commented on since taking office. And I didn't see any talking about this tariff move that just happened 2 days earlier because it seems like a lot of the conservatives are freaking out about this tariff move more so than the left, which is weird. But
Yeah. No, I saw a similar thing on a TikTok earlier. It's like talking about those protests as well. It's like people are literally out in the streets and they're literally just clamoring about all the wrong things, essentially.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
these
that's
these nationwide protests probably a good thing, right? Like we probably need like someone screaming from the rafters, like what is happening right now? But
they
but you're
look
you're doing it
if
to
they
call
were
them
holding up
Nazis.
signs
You do
if
like
they were all holding up signs saying like, imagine what would have happened. Imagine how much more productive this would be is if you get that big of a protest and everyone's holding up a sign saying Google the Triffin Dilemma. Like the currency's overvalued, trying to like inform people of the current situation, or like even referring to the current situation. That'd be one thing. But when we're talking about when you still got people, what gets the most attention is the typical hot button, the government doesn't belong in my uterus type of signs and things like that. It does kind of seem like especially when there's a civil war going on the right, where we're on the right, people are having these discussions about why we're doing the tariffs, whether we think it's going to be a good thing, bad thing. And when you see a lot of these like mainstream, left kind of commentators, it does kind of, it's starting to seem, at least in this moment, that these are the crazy people yelling out into the wind while while, like the actual problem is like way over here. Like
uh-huh.
they're missing the mark by a mile. It seems like.
Yeah,
So it's not looking too good for them.
I haven't seen a damn thing that this new administration has said about anything about or taken away trans rights. I mean, maybe they passed. I think they might have passed something about like athletics, like that. That might have been one
Yeah.
that they actually did. All
Yeah, they did a little bit of that shit, but
all
really
all
it's like
25 people that affected.
exactly, yeah. Yeah. And like same with the abortion, like I don't think they have anything about abortion. All that type of stuff. It's like I don't know if they've still it seems like they still got people buying it because there was however many seems like I don't know how many people were protesting, but it seemed like a lot. So there's still a lot of people who are worried about abortion, but
I didn't
none
even
of those people seem to notice what's going on.
I didn't even see these protests for the most part. And then I was at work the other day and my coworker's like, "Yo, you seeing all these protests?" I'm like, "No." He shows me a video and then like 5 minutes later he calls me over. He's like, "Oh, here's another one in Wisconsin." He's like, "Oh, here's another one in Washington. Oh, here's another one in like Texas." I'm like, I'm not seeing like anything about this, but I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't really see it much the day of either. I saw a lot the next day just on Twitter. Just like, yeah, I think it was like all the big cities in the whole country just had some type of organized protest, which, as far as it looked like, it was like fine. Like there's a big difference between that and like, normally I'm not much of like a protest guy, and I don't think the right is for the most part either. But there's a big difference between like peacefully protesting in the streets and in making your voice heard in numbers, strength in numbers, versus like burning down a Wendy's. And so it seemed like it was. I didn't see any. Normally, I would get this in my algorithm if there was any type of like violence or chaos going on, and it didn't really seem like there was much.
So, dude, I saw protests going on. This might have been like a couple of weeks back, but like people were like walking into like Tesla dealerships and like I don't know if they were like like trashing the place or just kind of like causing a ruckus. But like I don't really agree with that. Like I don't think you should like go into like places where people are like working. Literally, it's just like random dudes. It's like some like 18-year-old like working like literally like as a receptionist and he has to worry about like a mob of people coming in because like his boss's 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 boss is like
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the
Who
White
he's never
House,
met.
like
Yeah.
who he's never right, like, and so I saw that. I didn't really like that. Then I was thinking like, all right,
No, I
well,
agree. Same with when they're drawing all the people who are like keying the Nazi signs into the Tesla cars. Well, like they're going to the Tesla factories and like burning the cars or like breaking in stuff like that. But then there's also a bunch of people who are getting their cars keyed. Like
I saw that,
it's
yeah.
not like at the factory. It's like in someone's driveway, and they're getting like a swastika keyed into the side of their expensive electric vehicle. Where it's like, dude,
Dude, this
a year and a half
dude,
ago,
this
he
guy.
wasn't even with Trump. Like they might be on the left and they might have got it because they care about the environment.
I,
Like
I was literally about to say like this guy got this 4 years ago because he's a tree hugging hippie who is like
yeah,
he's
yeah,
trying to
exactly.
do the right thing, like, and
So dumb.
reduce his fossil fuel emission. I don't know if we've talked about this one. This is slightly different, but the term "your carbon footprint." Have you heard that? That was like a thing like
Yeah,
10, 20 years ago. That was a marketing campaign by BP, who BP's like tried to offload the onus of emissions onto the consumer. So instead of BP saying like, "Oh, we emit like 700,000 tons of like
uh,
carbon dioxide every year," it's
they
like
tricked you.
it's your fault. You're the one who leaves your computer plugged in overnight. Like think about your carbon footprint, right? It's just another like ingenious campaign by companies to offload the onus onto the consumer.
Yeah, sounds about right. And speaking of climate change, let me pull this up really quick, and it might take me a minute to pull it up. Because it kind of has to do with what we're talking about here, just because we're talking about the globe and in China and things like that. Let me see if I can share this. I came across this on accident the other day, and I was like, "Holy shit!" So
While sorry, what do you got?
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say
It'll
what
take me a minute to pull
yeah,
it up.
while you're looking at this, I have something to say about that as well. I've seen things like the United States, for example, and maybe like a couple other countries, they've been on the war path of trying to be like, oh, like net zero, or like reduce your carbon emissions, right? And then there's countries like China, or like maybe like Vietnam, like up and rising manufacturing companies or countries who are like, dude, what the fuck, you guys have been emitting for like decades now, and now that like we're on the rise, you're trying to like cut us off at the ankles, essentially. Like you're trying to pull the rug out
Yes,
from under us, like pull the ladder up after you've already climbed to the top. Like you're trying to stop other people from doing what you guys have been doing all along.
that is. I agree. I do think that is one of the primary reasons we're pushing for so hard for this climate change. Oh, we only have how many times do you hear people say, "Oh yeah, we've got 10 years left or 15 years left until the world's," and like realistically, where they're probably coming up with that number is we've got 15 years left before China overruns us or so. So it's like it is probably trying to put like a barricade up for them. But now here, let me see if I can share this. I came across this on accident because I was just taking a look. Let me see here. Let's see. There it is. Okay, can you see this map? So yeah, so I was just taking a look at the map and I saw there was a overlay to do air quality. So I go and I look here, and because I remember in Chicago recently, it was like a couple months ago, there was like a problem with the air quality. So I was
Yeah,
looking, I'm like,
we
oh, it
had
looks like
bad
the
like
air quality is
smog
pretty
or
good.
whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we had bad smog, and when we had bad smog, it kind of looked like this. It was like, they've got the thing here. This is a little bit worse over here in Michigan City. A lot of smog, but in Chicago, we're pretty good. What is the Yeah, we got 40. I guess that's good. Over here is 59. So higher is worse. So then we look over here, it's like, oh shit, what's going on over here? Damn, very unhealthy in Kansas. When the wildfires were going on in California, it was somewhere, it looked like this. It was like 100 and
Uh-huh.
something over there. And this was the air quality here. And now this is I don't know where Silicon Valley is, but it's somewhere over here. And this is like the main the tech hubs where all all the production's going on down here in Texas. Tesla's
What
got
is
its
going on
stuff
in
here in
Mexico down
Austin.
there?
Well, so Mexico isn't really
What is
pushing that hard for the climate changes, and I don't know what's going on in Durango, but that's looking rough. That's
that
that's they've
that
got one spot right there that's not looking good.
they're cooking
Okay,
down there.
now let's
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 zoom
see
back.
China. Let's see.
China we can't see because they don't let us,
Oh
but
yeah.
all this is India, and I'm imagining China is probably worse because China has many more factories than India, and their emissions are supposedly higher than India's, but India's are similar in magnitude. And look at how fucking terrible it is compared to all of the West. And so, like, part of the point on my point on bringing this whole thing up is that it's not so much that I'm like an anti or I think climate change is a hoax or I don't believe in it or any of that shit. I believe in it to a degree. I do think it's being pushed for like, you know, profit for, or
Political
whatever, political
gain,
gain
right?
or profit. But the main problem is like, okay, yeah, we can cut all of our emissions. This country over here can cut all of our emissions, and that won't do a damn thing because all of these countries over here all look like this. And so it's not going to help climate change. And instead, it's just going to kill our economy and let all of the Eastern Bloc continue to do what they're doing and then eventually overrun us.
Yeah. Do we not have South America or like Africa because they don't let us, or do we just not really care? Like,
What do you mean?
like
Yeah, let
South
me get rid
America,
of this
like
thing.
we don't have any of that data. You said like we can't see China's because they don't let us. Like South America and Africa is like completely like blank. Like, is that because we haven't like done the data, or like they don't let us, or I don't. You
So
probably
I
don't
think
know, but
I think what it is, I'm not 100% sure, but it makes sense though because all of the countries we have here. So this is Google Maps.
uh
All of the countries we have here are in our he hegemon hegemon. I don't know how we got India in here, but these other ones are in China's. So like it's not Apple. So all of the phones in Africa are Huawei phones, which is China's big phone company. They're not Apple or Google, and their internet providers are all Chinese internet providers. And I believe the same is true with a lot of countries in South America. And so I'm guessing that might be why is just that we don't have the data because they're not using our technology.
uh,
That could be wrong or missing something, but
yeah.
I know is true is that China is really taking a liking to Africa and trying to really entrench themselves in with Africa as like a kind of a trade partner, and they're investing in their development and stuff like that, and they use a lot of their tech. So
Probably a smart move. Africa is goddamn rich in everything besides like money.
yeah, right, yeah. When
Besides,
it comes to like resources and
yeah.
stuff like that, and that's part of the. I mean, that is part of the thing that is the problem with America's kind of foreign policy is that like our method seems to be like, yeah, we're just gonna go in and we're gonna go to the Middle East and we're just gonna, basically put in our guys in Israel and we're gonna give Israel all of our tech and then we're just gonna basically just it's our way or no way. And it's we basically use the stick where China uses the carrot, and China instead of like just drone striking Africa and taking their resources. They actually go in and invest in them and try to help develop them so that then they can develop a relationship and become trading partners. And they're doing the same thing in a lot of places. That's when Trump talks about the Panama Canal. They kind of did the same thing with the Panama Canal, where they came in and they actually, started, operating the ports and investing into the infrastructure of the surrounding areas and doing stuff like that. Whereas we need to do more of that, but we can't because our currency is overvalued.
Yeah. All right. What do you think? Closing thoughts here. I think we're kind of reaching the end here. I'll start off. I think it's a incredibly risky maneuver what Trump's trying to pull off here. The issue is like if say like 20 years from now we lost our position as the global economic superpower. Obviously, that would be a bad thing, but I feel like there's things we could do. Like it might be inevitable at this point that we're not going to stay the economic superpower, right? Like empires rise, empires fall. I feel like we could have, done something more along the lines of like a soft landing away from, having the global reserve currency, away from, having complete dominance over world trade. And this kind of just feels like a all or nothing sort of deal that like either we're gonna continue to be insanely powerful or we're about to fucking lose everything. And I just don't know if this you likened it to like a 12 leg plus 10,000 parlay essentially the other night. I just don't know if that's a bet that I'd be willing to take with the U.S. economy.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree 100%. I agree because I am sold on the idea of there's limited lifespans for the ruling empires, like prior to us, it was Great Britain, and it was only a matter of time before eventually they get faced with a similar situation that we are now, and they have to shrink their empire and allow someone else to take over. And it's kind of been like that all throughout history. I think before them it was the Dutch. And what ends up happening is that, a country like the UK now is just they're not the imperial power they once were a couple hundred years ago, but they have a pretty calm and safe environment
Uh,
and everything's fine and they're protected by us and they trade with us and they're allies with us. And so it's like that could be where we would have ended up going if we were to take that soft landing and we just become a less powerful, less globally relevant, but still very comfortable and prosperous
right.
nation. Whereas now we are playing around with war, and Trump was running on the idea of it's you vote for me or you vote for World War III with Kamala, and it's like, well, that's kind of what you're also doing now too. Not, I do respect it. I respect it. He's a risk taker. That's why I like him, and that's why I like Elon. Is that they're both notorious for taking big risks and hitting the payoffs more often than not. But yeah, it's I don't have the stone. I don't have as big of a risk tolerance as this guy. So I'm a little bit opposed to it. But well, hopefully it goes well.
Yeah.
see, we'll
Find
see
out.
what the fuck
Yeah.
happens. We might have our next podcast episode maybe in Chinese. So
Yeah. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
all right.